Welcome, everybody. Sunrise doesn't last all morning. The cloudburst doesn't last all day. And so my love's gone and left you with no warning. It can't always be this great. All things must pass. All things must pass away to where they came from. Righto. So, we're gonna talk about elders today. So, well, I guess I might mention my grandma passed away last week. So she was 93 years old. It's a very fine age. And I'm blessed to still have another grandma who's of the same age. So, and yeah, it got me thinking. I was already thinking about doing an episode about elders and the idea of like just the benefits of growing old, which are not really appreciated so much, I think, in our culture. Like, it's all about youth and blooming and beauty. It's all about action and doing and accomplishing and form. But I think, there's definitely another side to life, which is the side of like stillness and just kind of space and quietness, and there's a whole other dimension which I think we kind of interpret in spooky terms, like, oh, that's boring, or like sad, like you're not doing anything, or and so the idea of a second childhood, that when you're you're elderly, right? So you're not just old or senior, but you're elderly. So I guess whether that's when you're 70 or when you're 90, I guess it would be when you're becoming vulnerable, right? Again, like you were when you were a child. That we kind of perceive that as like the harbinger of death and disappearance in the West, because in general, we, like Nietzsche said, we've killed God. Like, people don't believe in God anymore. So we kind of don't believe life can go on after. So we think it's the end. So then getting old kind of is perceived as, a whiff of annihilation. However, I think that's not the whole truth there. I wouldn't subscribe to that particular belief system. I understand why people might think that, but we'll get to this in detail. But I would give you a little spoiler alert, or a spoiler, which is people kind of assume, in general, in my experience, that, like, so atheists, for example, would say this, that the belief that it's even possible that life continues after death, like the people who say that they think it's possible or even probable, which is what I would say, it's probable, it's more than 50% likely that life continues after death, or those who even say it's certain, a certainty, that's all wishful thinking, and basically a desire. It's not based upon logic, but it's based upon a desire for emotional stability, and a desire for certainty in life, and that it's all fine, all good. It can help people out. I understand it, but at the end of the day, it's not logical. It's just feel good, right? It's just based upon a desire, an irrational desire for certainty. Whereas we atheists, we're just at peace with the facts, and that's okay. However, I would argue, some people do that for sure. Yeah, they believe in life after death in order to give them emotional stability, but not everyone. And I would say atheists, a lot of them do the exact same thing. That's why they're still atheists. So instead of being, say, an agnostic, where you say, well, I don't believe, in a higher power necessarily, but I believe it's possible. Like, I believe I don't know. I'm just a human. What do I know? Anything's possible, really. What does an ant know about humans? What does a human know about the universe, which is infinitely large, right? So, so you could make the case, and I would make the case, that atheists basically are subscribing to the materialist, deterministic, or at least materialist scientific worldview, like scientism, which is based upon a lot of assumptions, actually, not proven things, the results of experiments, like science, but just beliefs. So atheism, I would say, equally, you can say, oh yeah, I don't think there's life after death, but have you died? Do you know? So we'll talk a bit more about that. It's not the main point of this episode, but I think it is relevant when we think about elders and aging. But I would say actually a lot of people, they have a desire for certainty, which expresses itself in this allegiance to this worldview they've been given in school, etc. That, science shows that, there's no God, that's all kind of silly or whatever. There's no life after death. Consciousness is, if you get into the details, consciousness is a kind of illusion, actually. And it's all just your brain, and that's nothing, Either consciousness is an illusion the whole time, or else it's temporary and then disappears, and, that's it. It's a wrap. And it's like, well, you might think, how could that give you certainty? Why would that be? But, basically, it's this idea like we have complete certainty for a while, and then you disappear. So it's kind of a pact you can make. And also it's just familiar, like that's what you're raised with. If you say to someone, well, think about it. You haven't died. So after death, either life continues or life doesn't continue. 50-50, right? Isn't that just like equally likely? And then when you hear all these stories of children who Dr. Ian Stevenson from Boston University, he studied, he went around the world looking up and attempting to corroborate, seeing if he could, the stories, widespread stories where children, very young children, maybe below the age of 5 or something, will commonly talk about past lives. Like, oh, with my old mummy and daddy, I did blah, 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 blah. Or in my old house when I lived on the island. And these Pakistani parents, what are you talking about? What island? Like, we live in the middle of, I don't know, inland, And so it seems like from that, actually there is evidence that some things did seem to match up, where the stories of the children, like a minority of those children, he was able to, I believe, corroborate the stories where it definitely looked like it was real. Not conclusive, I think, but, Anyway, so that, I guess we'll just put that there because that's not the main point. Finish this here. But that there is reason to think, and, that this is the way it works, and out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, people commonly report the same things, and so you could look into that if you want. But I think the main point is death is assumed as an inevitability of like the end in our culture. But I would say if you do a bit more thinking, and if you are very determined to be unbiased and just clear-headed and logical, you will come to the conclusion that either it's kind of 50-50, like we don't actually know. So no one's run an experiment going, all right, let's see if, you die, then come back and tell us if there's heaven. It's like, well, if you've come back, then you didn't really die, did you? It was a temporary thing, maybe came back like, people who say, oh, they were dead on the operating table for like a minute or something, and then they came back. But if you're able to come back, how do we know that, maybe you have to be fully gone before you can, find the next place? Possibly, we don't know. Or maybe it's just your experience, or maybe you went there and then you just forgot it because you came back. Who knows? We don't, I would say no one's who's died permanently has come back to tell us what's going on. So, but whatever people feel comfortable with, whatever they want in their worldview, if they believe in reincarnation or whatever, that's fine. But I think in our culture, in the West, especially, say the English-speaking world in particular, we have got this subconscious. A lot of people would think that perhaps we're at peace with death, like you've accepted it. But I think a lot of people deep down are very unsettled by the idea of growing old, getting weaker, losing power, and then all that you have slipping away. Whereas if you have that other point of view where you can have the idea that life goes on, then that's not necessarily going to be such a problem. And even if you do believe that death is the end, I think we kind of still appreciate and honor and kind of learn more about and think more about the positives of being an elder and what spending time with those people can give us. So, all right. So, yeah, I think a lot of people, and maybe me when I was younger, would think like, oh, why should I go hang out with, maybe this is just me being a psychopath, but I didn't grow up with my grandmas that much, really. Like they were in Ireland and I was in Australia. So I saw them. I met one of my grandmas when I was 12, first time. The other, Nana, who's just passed, I met, I guess, when I was really 4 years old, and then maybe 7 years old, and then 12 when I came to Ireland. And so there's these little, I meet them, for a week or like at a time every few years or something. So it wasn't a very strong relationship with these elders I had. But then, so I guess maybe I missed out on something that's more natural to people. Maybe, you're like, yeah, Jamie, we know all this, but it was more when I was older, I kind of, and I guess say when I moved to Ireland, and even before that, just spending time with my grandparents, especially my grandmas, because my grandfathers have both died, but that I came to see like, in a way, it's kind of like boring sometimes, like just to be very frank. Sometimes like, okay, we're telling the same story I've heard before, or like, like talking about something which, might be kind of polite chit chat or something that doesn't really interest me too much, or and it just in general with other, older people, this can happen. So perhaps you can relate to my very candid statements about, the negatives of like, if you're going to socialize with people your age, or you're going to socialize with young kids, we're not quite on the same wavelength. It could be fun, but sometimes you might be like, it's not too stimulating for me because they're just on some other dimension. And then the similar thing with elderly people. Sometimes we feel, I think, like, yeah, it's cool, but it's not as satisfying as someone who's on your same wavelength as you. Maybe it's a bit more simpler. What they're, the brain is often, some elderly people can be just as sharp. But perhaps like the culture, it's just the way of being back in the past was more about, kind of more passing news or whatever, or, or it might be just ways of life, where what they want to talk about might be different to what you're interested in as some young person in the modern world. And so you can have these cultural differences and differences of interest, differences of values, where they might have different opinions about things. They might be complaining about immigrants, and you might think, oh, what a drag, I have to listen to this, But, and then sometimes, like the body grows and then decays. A flower is budding and it blooms and it wilts and it dies. And then another flower buds, blooms, wilts, and dies. And so this is the cycle of life, and this happens to our bodies. If you take very good care of your body, you sleep enough, you eat the right amount of good food, not too much. In general, eating less extends your lifetime, your lifespan. But eating good quality, fresh, natural food, taking care of your health, right? You can, and being positive, right, and laughing, all that stuff, you can live longer, and your body will, in general, be much more healthy as you're getting older. But it will decay sooner or later, right? And our minds, the brain is part of the body, and that's the interface with which our consciousness is engaging with this dimension. So, it also, you can see things slowing down, like when you're really drunk, okay, maybe you're not as able to do a crossword puzzle or something, right? So, not saying old people are drunk, but for many people there is some sort of like memory. There can be memory issues where memory goes away, or kind of just speech things where speech is slower, or maybe ideas become less complex, or learning, being able to learn new things or process new things. um, or just in general, just even the interest in thinking might wane. It might be just like more satisfying as a resting place, just to have one's consciousness kind of more in the seeing mode rather than the thinking mode. So just observing life as the watcher, the consciousness, the awareness, which is the dominant thing in meditation, right? You're tuning into that pure space and silence of awareness. That and then so less of the thinking and analyzing and remembering and anticipating and daydreaming and whatever. Like, so it seems like that can happen, and that can not always, my nana who's just passed, she was very sharp, like her mind was very sharp until the end. Her body began to decay more recently, but but say like the cultural issue thing, where just to mention that, like, I think it's important. This is kind of a side. I want to talk about this in another episode, but so it's a side note here. But it's not. I think we need to keep in mind that future generations, when there's progress at large and people there's enough prosperity and peace where perception is able to grow, right, and people are able to become wiser and more educated, and more aware, or whatever. It makes sense that future generations, they have higher standards than the previous generations in general. If that's the case, they become more conscious of things, less selfish, more, experience accumulates just as it does in a single lifetime, which is one, probably the main reason why elders should be honored. Their experience accumulates, and they're able to kind of say, oh, I've had that problem and had that opportunity many, many times, and this is what happened when I did that and that. They've had more experiments and more results from those experiments, so they're able to share that with us if they're, being good scientists with their own lives. But similarly, culture evolves, and so, new generations are able to reap the rewards of that. And so, future generations might look back and go, oh my God, like, I'm sure they will, like the way we treat animals in general, like factory farming in particular, and, commercial overfishing of the oceans. Oh, let's all talk about climate change, but don't mind the fishing, don't mind their factory farming. It's all about climate change. That's the only thing we need to worry about. And the solution also benefits these conglomerates of mega corporations. That's another issue not to be talked about in this particular episode. But so I think the way we treat animals is something where people in the future are going to look back and go, like, well, that's pretty gnarly, or like pet shops and some of the things that go on. But, so would you want someone who lives a really good life, they're a really good person, but they happen to, say, eat fish, and they don't realize what the fish industry is all about and what it's doing to the oceans, these huge fisheries? Should they have their statue torn down 200 years from now because of their ignorance? Because that's what we're doing to people who maybe like a few hundred years ago were really way, way better than the rest of their generation. They were really making a huge effort to go above the norm of what they were trained to be, and actually, made great strides, which helped the next generation move forward, and yet we'll still pull down their statues and demean them because they're not up to our standards. So I think there's a lack of humility there. And so I think with elders, it's important to understand that, yeah, they might complain about immigrants or something, or they might complain or whatever it is, things that doesn't quite fit with your own current, values or understanding or current culture or whatever. But that there's a certain leeway to be given, and you should communicate clearly and say, well, I think this, and this is why I think, it, and you can make your case. But I think it's a bit different when conversing with someone of your own generation, where it's not so much like giving someone a pass and just letting them be, oh, I think we should go, kill all the cats. It's like, oh, that's a bit intense, it's more just understanding that we all have our limitations, and we all have, you've only got so much soul power. And so say someone who is born into a criminal cartel, and they are born and raised to be almost like a psychopath. Like, you take care of the family, but everyone else, they're barely human. They're just, expendable. Do what you want, kill them, lie to them, whatever. Rob them. that kind of person who can, by the end of their life, be kind of like a kind of um, bit of a bit of a mean person, not a very pleasant person, and yet they refuse to do what they were trained to do and to harm others. Now they either leave people be or they even help them a little bit. They try to be a productive member of society. They don't exploit others. They were born and raised to be like a vicious snake, and they've, by the end of their life, they're like that. They're actually uplifting the world in a small way, but just kind of more, just, they're a bit mean and, a bit unsavory, but, they're not causing problems. That's better, I would say, than someone who's born in a very good family. By the end of their life, they haven't changed it at all. Well, I don't know, maybe it's an open question, but I think if they've done more growth, they've expressed more, desire for change and evolution and virtue by trying to. That's how we clean up the world. We clean up ourselves. And so, and that's an extreme example, but so someone, when we're talking to our elders or whatever, and they might say something that doesn't quite jive with what our views, but so the cultural difference there. But I think you can still communicate with them, but have an understanding that there is a certain element of humility in understanding that we are standing on the shoulders of giants, and that future generations will probably do the same to us. But oh my God, how could you say that? Da, da, da. And you might say, well, look, that's your way of thinking. I've got a different way of thinking, which maybe was more adaptive and made more sense back when I was there, growing up. Maybe the environment's changed, and so the new generation is adapting to that, as they should. Or maybe it's just an obsolete worldview, but, we can't all be perfect. We're the best we can, but no one scores, a perfect score, like, in sport or whatever, or I guess the score can keep getting higher and higher. So that'd be something. But so these are now that's some things about. Well, I guess I don't know why I focus on the negative first. Should focus on the positive. But what's the benefit of hanging out with our elders? I think, for one thing, if it's your family, it's your family, and that's great. And so coming from Australia to Ireland, being able to like be with my grandparents has been really amazing, and being able to connect to my family like that is really beautiful. And so if you haven't seen your grandparents in a while, like I'm sure when you see them, you can relate to that. So and I guess not having it around me, maybe it's made me appreciate it more now that I don't take it for granted or something. But I think a lot of it is, it's very interesting to, I guess there's two main things that I really like about it beyond just, oh yeah, it's nice to be with your family. One is, I guess there's three things. One is the experience, right? Like they have things they've learned, they can tell you about, so they can have good advice, or, oh yeah, I've been through that, and this is, just remember to do that. So they can often have good advice for you. And you might ask them, I've got this situation, what do you think I should do? And so you can do that with your parents also, who are elders in a way to us, or anyone who's older, they have more experience. So that's one thing. The second thing would be that, they like have it's like you can go time traveling. Like I can talk to my grandma. Now I can, I could talk to both of them. Now I can only talk to one but I believe, they're both still in the universe. Just one of them is in this dimension, another is in a different dimension now. But I can talk to my grandma and say, okay, so yeah, tell me, what was it like, when you were young, right? When you were like 10 years old. Okay, what kind of clothes were you wearing? Where did you live? How did you do? What did you do in the morning? What was your routine? And I'm talking, and and she'll tell me about like the 1930s. Like, oh well, we had this and this, and we had the horse and trap, and we walked along there, and then we'd go milk the cows before and then at the end of the day or whatever, Dad would be there, boiling the potatoes, which we'd feed them to the pigs, and he'd check my Irish or my catechism or whatever, and he'd check that we all did our homework, and it's like just crazy. You can't find that in a history book, or I'm sure you could, but Like you can find details that are nowhere recorded. It's not in a library somewhere. It's not in a study. It's not in a movie. It's just in the consciousness, in the memory of an individual who was there. These little things that weren't important enough to put in a book or something. And so I can say, oh yeah, what were you growing? You know, and oh, how did you do that? Okay, and oh, that some situation happened. How did you react? How did your parents feel about it? And it's really interesting. Like my grandma, McGlue, so she was telling me about when she has a memory, a very, very young memory. So she's 93 years old now. She's a very young memory, or very old memory, a memory from when she was very young, of being with her great grandmother, who was a very tall, elegant woman. She was wearing black because her husband had died, so she was in mourning for the rest of her life. That's the way it worked. And she remembers being in the same room as her. So I have a memory of this morning standing, you know, in the street somewhere. Okay, that was just then. I have a memory of physically being there. She has a memory of physically being with this woman. And that woman, so my grandma's great grandma, so what my great 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 grandma, she was born just after the famine, the Great Famine in Ireland, and so she was dealing with the aftermath of the death of 1 million people and the emigration of another 1 million, and all the chaos and trauma that affected everyone who survived. Out of a population of 9 million, 2 million disappeared suddenly, and many, many more people were, you know, pretty messed up by it. She was growing up in the aftermath of that, and she was in the same room as a woman who I'm in the same room listening to her memory of it. And so it's just outrageously interesting for me, like to think, you know, these kind of things. And I love getting, you know, once they're gone, it's gone. You know, we don't have it. You have to get it while it's going. You know, and then, you know, we don't have the access to it anymore. So I love that. You know, I'll always try. You know, so I'll go visit her. You know, I should visit them more, to be honest. But I think that's a balance. You know, it's a work in progress, right? But we all have our lives and the things we're trying to build and, you know, live and whatever. But I think it's a wonderful thing to touch base with your forebears and kind of just ask them things like about the family, about like life in general back in the past, and you can kind of go time traveling. A third thing, benefit of like, apart from just, you know, it being a family, and this is something you get with anyone, right? Is that when elderly people, when they have that experience of kind of their body and perhaps even their mind is becoming, but definitely their body and their life, their opportunities, their circumstances, it's kind of becoming simplifying, you know? Well, their body's becoming more vulnerable and less able to do things. Things take longer. Some things aren't possible anymore. Some things are more complicated, you know? And so it kind of draws in the circle of your activities. So that's a simplification of your life via increasing vulnerability of your body. And also just interests. Oh yeah, I've done that. Been there, done that, worn the t-shirt, as my grand would say. And, you know, okay, I don't want to do it. I'm not interested. And so, you know, going out there and kind of this outgoing movement is less interesting in general, and the inward movement is more interesting. It's more interesting to just consider what you've already experienced and digest it and just be here in the now. And so, and being an elder is an opportunity for consciousness expansion, which I think is the most interesting thing there is, actually. So I'm very much looking forward to. I'm enjoying my life now. I'm going to enjoy my life at every age. I think every age has pros and cons, and we should focus on the pros, you know. And because why not, you know, makes life better. And so when I'm old, you know, I'm looking forward to, I'm going to be some cool old man with a nice suit or whatever I'm doing, you know, and I think I'm just going to get deep into the mystical dimension of just like the now and just, understanding the paradox of how we can be an individual, but we're also the universe. and it seems like that would be endlessly entertaining to investigate and pursue and experience. To cultivate my wisdom, and help pass that on to anyone who wants wisdom, and the benefits of experience. But it's a great thing. Like when I visit, when I'm hanging out with older people who are, if they are in that kind of state of perhaps, their mind is kind of simplifying because it's less able, problems of memory, like I can't remember what was happening, a while, 5 minutes ago or whatever. So it becomes less important. You're more in the now. Not in the same way that, say, someone who's fully in command of their mind in their prime can enter the now as a voluntary choice. It's a bit less voluntary, but nonetheless, much like a child, right? You are kind of more and more just living in the present moment. Like, you say to a tiger, excuse me, what time is it? The tiger will tell you if it doesn't eat you. What time is it? It's now. What other time would it be? Like 3 or 4. Tiger's just living in the now. Everything's now, and so that's the spiritual dimension. And I think the highest life seems to be the cross. It's like the intersection of the present, the eternal dimension, and the temporal dimension, as Eckhart Tolle describes it. But elders kind of live more in that dimension, and so when I am with them, I like to kind of tune into that, and it can be very enjoyable as a balance to, when you're talking to your friends, it might be more like banter and jokes and more interesting, or talking about, intellectual or philosophical stuff or whatever, or so it's kind of an invitation to presence and to that other state. And I guess just to connecting to people on a deeper level. And then I think that feeds back into when you're connecting with people who are your age, and so they're more, they're less kind of just in the stillness of the present, and they're more, active in life. Their life is more dynamic and, yang and kind of like energetic and whatever. You can still connect to those people like you're doing to your grandma or whatever it is, or to your elderly neighbors or whatever, or some random dude on the street that you start talking to, some old guy or whatever, or old lady. And you can kind of start connecting to even people who have very interesting ideas and etc. Not just connecting to the ideas, but connecting to the soul, looking into their eyes and just enjoying the simplicity of a connection. So like I can hang out with, my grandma, and she might be saying something which I'm like, maybe not bored by or something, but like just, not particularly hugely interested in, but kind of like, oh yeah, just talking and just asking questions and reciprocating, just as a kind of like a little dance. Yeah, let's do just that. We're hanging out. I'm just enjoying the time with you. Maybe it's not intensely stimulating, like some conversation about the weather or complaining because I'm like, oh, I love this weather, or whatever it is. But even in that situation, and there's many things where it is interesting, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. But just even in the worst case scenario, which I think a lot of people might kind of focus on. Often we focus on the negative, but you can just be looking into their eyes and just being here and just breathing, and just enjoying the present moment, and just connecting with them and letting them know, like, hey, I see you, I see you there, and yeah, just being together. And then it's a great reminder, and you can also bring that depth in when you're talking with other people, of your own age. And I think, and especially if it's more extreme and you're hanging out with someone who's like got memory problems or something, right? Then, or whatever, there's some sort of, the mind is becoming less sharp, and you might, go like, oh, it's hard to have a conversation or whatever. Or if they're asking you the same thing over and over again, if that ever happens, then you can kind of treat it just like a type of meditation where, like, you're not meant, it doesn't really matter what's being said. Okay, yeah, you just repeat the answers or same thing or say a different answer. I guess the same would be true of people with dementia who are younger, if that happened. We can still connect with them. The soul is still there. The consciousness is just as clear. You can see there is someone inside there's someone inside there who is having a first person video game camera angle experience of the universe, where they don't see their face, they just see out, in front of them. In a video game, got like the rifle or whatever, and then you don't see your face, you're just moving around. That's like, we're all like that in life, right? That you see your face in the mirror in a photograph, but you never actually see your real face, right? There's other people are having that embodied internal experience, an audience of one inside the amphitheater or the cinema of your mind. And so you can just say, connect to people and go recognize that presence in people. And even in the those kind of more extreme circumstances of memory problems or whatever like that, So I think that's a beautiful thing that I've become more aware of as I've gotten older. Is that like, it's not just people who have interesting ideas to talk about that you can benefit from being with. It's a great benefit from just settling in and kind of just engaging with people on that deeper level. So these are some benefits of being with older people. Also, like culturally, cultural exchange between generations, like you can hang out with someone from a totally different country and go like, oh, wow, interesting. The way they did that was different, or the way they reacted to this situation was different to what I would have done, or, or you hear their thoughts about things. Oh, that's interesting, the way you think. And so it's kind of the same thing with other generations, the culture may be quite different due to changing circumstances. And so you can kind of have some sort of exchange of ideas, which can benefit them and benefit yourself. Whether you learn something from them or you just hone your ideas about why, that I don't really like. I don't feel that that's the correct way to do this or think about this or whatever. So even if you're getting exposed to things which you think you don't want to integrate, it's a reminder and a clarification of what you do believe and why. And so it's all to the good. So yeah, these are some benefits of being with older people. And, just being an older person yourself. Yeah, you're learning, you're growing wiser if you want to. And I think there is the opportunity to really, go deeper and elevate your consciousness. And basically, why would I do that? Well, it's actually the best thing there's nothing as good as it. In my experience, nothing is as sweet as truth, the truth of who you are, the truth of who we are, who I am. It's just, deliciously joyful. And you can go, you might not be able to go run a marathon when you're 90, although, is it Helio Gracie, or one of the, the Gracie family who, innovated Brazilian jiu-jitsu, taking the jiu-jitsu from Japan, or jiu-jitsu, and making it what it is today, make it more practical, basically, as a self-defense thing. So Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which has taken the planet by storm, that he was doing it when he was like in his 90s, and just so you can keep, and being an expert. And so if you take care of yourself, you can physically still have a lot of opportunities, and it seems like it's easier to maintain it than to regain it. So, my plan is basically maintain a state and of optimized health and fitness as well as I can. Working on it, work in progress. Full disclosure, not as good as it should be, probably. But sure, no one's perfect. We're all juggling and dancing and learning along the way. But then, and to just maintain that, and build the sandcastle as strong as I can, and then as the tide comes in, just keep playing along and keep building, having fun, enjoying the process. Not to have a sandcastle, but to build a sandcastle, to enjoy the journey of, what someone said, the journey is the reward. Your man, Kevin Trudeau, very interesting stuff. So the journey of just keeping your, cultivating your health and fitness as long as you can, and knowing like no sandcastle lasts forever, and nor should it. Would that be really so interesting? So, but nonetheless, so we can cultivate our health and maintain these. But in general, it is kind of as a natural movement of expansion and then contraction, just like breathing. Just, the universe is breathing in birth and death. And birth and death are opposites. As Eckhart Tolle said, life is not the opposite of death. Birth is the opposite of death. A life begins, a life ends. And life includes all those things. Life has no opposite. Life is everything. Life is infinity and nothingness. It's everything there is. The whole universe is consciousness. The whole universe is alive. There's nothing else. And if you think about it, how could there be? And again, we're ants to the universe. What do we know? But it seems basically, seems to make sense. But point being, for us as we're getting older, and me personally, what my plan is just to enjoy the ages, enjoy what's coming up and the new experiences and the new eras that are available. One chapter ends and another's begun. But then, to become an elder and to be of service to people by cultivating wisdom. And it's kind of a, transition from the ground up, body, mind, soul, or even just say body and soul, body and mind, like going from, the more practical, or embodied, action animal thing, more up to the kind of more spiritual side of things. And as that can be you can be blooming in your prime spiritually, even as your body is wilting. And that's a transfer of energy. And so, that's something beautiful to look forward to. And I would say, how long do you want to live? Some people, it seems they just want to live as long as they can, or they want to upload their consciousness into a computer or something if they can, or clone themselves. It's like, but isn't that going to be like that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie? If you clone yourself, how is that you? Isn't it just some other person living in your body? Like, who knows? But I personally feel quality is more important than quantity. So I'd rather live a short, good life than a long, poor life. And yet, if I can have both, then great. That would be the best. Quality and quantity, but quality being the superior virtue, the more important thing. And so I think I would like to live as long as I can be healthy. And, I suppose no one really wants to have to suffer in old age, although that is natural to some extent. Like, many people have that, but many don't also, But of course that can be intimidating. Sickness, loss of consciousness, if there are cognitive problems, that can be pretty terrifying. But I think it's much like everything in life. We can, the serenity prayer. So may I have the courage to control what I can, the serenity to accept what I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. So we can do what we can, and let life take care of the rest. But I do think the idea that we should want to be young forever, seems a bit immature. It's a bit childish to want to be youthful forever, or to be young. To be youthful, you can be youthful when you're old, right? You can be childlike when you're an elder. And a true elder, I guess, should be childlike. You should have that integrated. And a true adult should be childlike as well, I guess, like, in a way, just trying to integrate your inner child and that kind of element of mystery and wonder with the more adult expression of competence and whatever, and pragmatism. So being an elder. Now, in our society, elders aren't always treated so well, I find, not just that people don't want to be them and they're afraid of growing old and they're not looking forward to it, but that maybe people, I suppose this has probably always happened with some people, but you hear stories of people hitting elderly people, or robbing them, or whatever. Of course the media always focus on the negative things. That's what they do. Makes sense. That's how they make money. By triggering primal emotions, but like anger, disgust, and fear, or sadness. But it doesn't have to be that way, but that is kind of the way it is in general in the mainstream media, corporate media, legacy media, whatever you want to call it. But it does seem in general like perhaps there has been a kind of cultural degradation where people, children talk back to their parents, teenagers intimidate the teachers, and nothing happens to them. And then all the boys or whatever are all trying to compete for who's the biggest alpha male by, being problems in the classroom. Whereas if that was nipped in the bud, like it was in the past, say, perhaps a lot of those boys wouldn't have felt obliged to do that. They could still look cool to Susie, Jane, or whatever, without having to go down that road. Be cool within the confines of the limits which are set by the school. Like, yeah, you're doing your work, yeah. And look, I got a great score. Oh, within these limits, how can I be cool? What about being extremely competent, or, young people talking back to, insulting or intimidating elders, like, older people on public transport or something, or people not giving up their seats or not opening doors, or all kinds of things like this. There are, we can't be sure how much it's blown out of proportion, but I think everyone, at least me, my sense is that like it seems like that's increased then compared to what it used to be. And so I think, you don't want, say in school, like, teachers going crazy, caning everyone. But at the same time, what, like a student is allowed to like punch a teacher, and the teacher isn't allowed to punch back? I don't know. Doesn't that seem a bit imbalanced? What if it was like you punch the teacher and the teacher punches you back in the face? I guess, the danger would be that it could get out of control. But I'd say there is some sort of balance which has been lost there. And apparently there's a lot of teachers who, I think someone was saying in France maybe, that there's areas where the teachers are just terrified that if they did anything like that, the parents of the kids would come and, be onto them. And not like punching back, but even just talking back, or like, kind of enforcing some sort of discipline on people. So, and parents, there's this idea in the Anglophone world that, you're harming your children, you're traumatizing your children, and a lot of the problems in the world are because of this happening in previous generations. By infringing the natural freedom of your child, you're harming them, that idea. And which seems to be kind of nonsense, like, you can see where it would come from, but if you think about it, I think it makes a much more sense that we are actually harming them by doing that. Snake eating its own tail. By giving them total freedom, you take away their freedom. If you want to give the child freedom, like for millions of years, do you think Stone Age humans and, humans in the Dark Ages and the Roman Empire or Egypt or like 1600s, 1800s, but throughout history, do you think parents are just letting their children be the boss and just do whatever they want? Because children, as they should, they're trying to grow in competence and be a creative being, so they're trying to take control, and that's good. They should do that. But do you think the parents would just let them do that? Oh yeah, you want a toy, you want a sweet, you want this. That's good that you want things. That means you're alive. If you didn't want anything, that would be dangerous. That would mean there's a problem. Like, oh, maybe you're sick. Maybe there's where's your drive? Where's your motivation to build your life? Like, how are you going to turn into an adult if you're not trying to grow? And but there would naturally be a limit. Just like my tooth. Apparently, if you remove one wisdom tooth, I had my 4 wisdom teeth removed simultaneously a few years ago, because they said, well, only 2 of them are actually a problem, but if we take them out, then the other 2 on the other side would start to move through into the opposing gum, because there's no resistance. So it's a state of kind of, what do you call that? Dynamic resistance or something? There's some word for that, I think. But these opposing energies where it's a homeostasis, like a balance. And so they had to remove all 4. And so I think if we're removing the resistance of parents to the kind of the will to power of these barbarians or young children who aren't socialized yet, they're just little mammals doing what little mammals do, then doesn't that make sense that that's going to kind of cause this to move too far in the wrong way, and it, to become little dictators or spoilt, or mini tyrants. And you see very sad sometimes parents who their children are acting out, and they're kind of practicing, embodying behaviors, which, like every parent, I'm not going to tell other parents how to raise their children, but I have the right to my opinion. And especially when I think it's important to talk about these things so that we can all help each other and show each other our blind spots and try to grow together. That's the most natural of things, right? So that's all I'm doing here, But it's very sad to me when I see children who should be told, no, don't do that. That's bad. I'm not saying you're bad. You're perfect. You're my little love. You're my little soul, there's nothing wrong with you. What you're doing is bad. You don't want to invite that demon in. Maybe don't say it in those terms, but basically, communicating like, no, that's not allowed. And imposing that limit on their freedom, that allows them to develop in a healthy direction where, okay, you're not just domineering and trying to take toys from everyone. You're not demanding things of everyone all the time. You're respectful. You're embodying ways of behavior which will help you thrive when you're older, because it's very hard to change when you're older. You can change, but it's easier to change when you're younger, right? You're malleable. You're adapting to the environment. So humans can live in the Arctic or the desert or wherever, or all these different kinds, cities, jungle, nomadic, settled, whatever. All these different milieus you can live in because the child is so malleable, it can adapt. And then once, adolescence is like, all right, more or less we know where we are. Okay, just solidify this now and work on the details. And so if the child hasn't been helped, guided into this is the way things work and this is what will allow, if you behave in that way, it's going to be hard to keep a girlfriend or keep a job or make progress or make friends, People aren't going to want to play these games with you. And so instead of letting society reject you harshly and remorselessly, I would do it in a loving way because I love you, because you've come from my body and you're my child. I'm going to do it for you and help set the pattern which is going to help you thrive. So when you do that, you're taking away their freedom in a way. You're setting a limit, a circle within which they can be free. You can do whatever you want within this circle. So you could say, yeah, but you're restricting their freedom. However, that circle, they can go infinitely deep into it. There's an infinite number of, like chess, you need some rules within which, if there's no rules, you can't play chess. It's boring, right? But then if there are these constraints, these rules, there's infinite variability within that to express yourself. So it's a paradox, but you need some limit on freedom to have true freedom. And so with a child, it would be, I think, the same thing. You're allowing them then to develop within that, and then when they're older, they can start to build upon that and create their life. And then, so that's an example where elders have a role. And I guess I think it's a two-way. There's two sides to this, I think. The degradation of elderhood in our society. And I think it is both that not enough respect and admiration and recognition and celebration is given to elders, whether it be a parent to a child or an older brother to a younger brother or whatever, saying like, yeah, I know a bit more than you. And it's not always going to be the case, like the older brother isn't always right. Your parent isn't always right. But in general, to understand that, yeah, in general, there's, especially when you're a young child, your parent, they have experience you need. Once you're a teenager, it's a little bit different. But your uncles and people in society, they have things you need, and maybe your parents still. And when you're a student, instead of getting your professor cancelled, being like, well, your professor knows maybe more than you do, maybe, just at least having that presumption until otherwise, evidence indicates otherwise. So there's both the element that there's more respect and honor needs to be given to elders, but also the complicating things, I think, is there has been a degradation of elderhood itself, where they are there are fewer elders, and in general, I think older people are less worthy of recognition, celebration, etc. Again, not their souls are perfect, but it seems many people, they don't have that shining light of an elder when they're 70, right? They're still trying to be 40, many people, or they're focused on consumerism and materialism because of this cultural programming, which has ramped up in the last 100 years or so to make huge amounts of money for big corporations. We've got this kind of dumbed down culture for the plebs to just go consume. So this is, and this, also atomization, where communal bonds are broken down as, again, for the benefit, partly as a result of technological innovation, cities, trains, we're able to live and kind of in a way required to live in order to survive in these, modern technologically driven environments, because, like even going back to farming, and like when the steam engine came in and stuff, let's just say, for example, like at a certain point, when was that? Industrial Revolution, I guess. Newer, more advanced technology made farms able to produce just as much food with fewer people. So like, okay, we don't need all these workers here. We'll just use these machines. And so, okay, now the workers, what are they going to do? They need a job. And at the same time, in the cities, there were new machines saying, oh yeah, we can create new things in the cities. We just need people to work them. So there's a shift, a transition where a lot of people move from the countrysides into the cities to get work there. So that's technology driving a change there, where it's and then within the cities and within the farms still, etc. There's been continuing waves of technological innovation driving economic changes, which kind of separate people from the communities and from, I guess, culture or traditions, traditional knowledge, perhaps. But then also, along with that, there's been this kind of intentional cultivation of, I think, a more dumbed down culture, just because profit at all costs. And there's all these feedback loops, like, so say the death of God in Nietzsche's terms, saying, oh, we have killed God, and all, can't remember the thing, all the something in the world can't wash our hands clean of the blood or something. So I think with that profound change in our culture, some people, nihilism has become much more common, where people think, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Nothing really matters. And so that kind of, again, allows more of a, well, I'm going to invest my money. I want maximum profit. Oh, this corporation is doing terrible things to people or to the environment or to culture or to whatever. Well, I don't know. It's not really my problem, is it? I'm just going to, if I don't do it, someone else will do it. So I'll just let that happen. And I'll just, get my short-term profit by supporting this corporation with my investment, my capital. In the past, people would have gone, well, that's not very Christian. I'm going to get in trouble with Jesus, more or less, So, okay, I can't do that. And so there's these kind of checks and balances on these processes. Anyway, that's a tangent, right? But this is just another aspect. Social and economic changes connected to cultural changes, causing people to be detached from communities and social bonds, where it's no longer, it takes a village to raise a child. It's like, well, where's the village, Even in a village, people might all be on TV and, there's more like talking to each other and stuff. But, in general, it seems like I'm able to talk into this microphone and communicate with people all over the planet via technology. So there's, all hail technology. It's amazing. But like almost everything, it's got the other side to it. There's detriments to it, downsides. And I think it has, in general, caused a lessening of communal bonds and a disruption of the traditional kind of society. And so elders aren't passing on all this knowledge as much. And when, a child is acting up against the parent or something, and, the village or the community might previously have a talk to the parent or a talk to the child to say whoever's out of line, and it might help but that's happening less, it seems. And so, and there's all kinds, and the elders regulating the adults, regulating the children, so it's difficult. But it seems like, to come back to the main point, not only would I advocate, I think, parents being benevolent dictators, saying, look, I'm not your friend. I'm not just your friend, little child. I'm something a bit different. It's called a parent, right? I'm like a friend, but I'm also here to help make you compatible with society in a way that respects your soul, and doesn't turn you into a zombie. But I'm not here just to make you feel good. And if I do that, I'm actually going to cause the opposite. I'm going to make you feel terrible, because I'm going to make it very hard for you to live in this ecosystem. And so there's that. And then in school, same thing with teachers having enough power over the school kids. Oh, you're going to cause problems, and so the whole class can't learn, and they get more and more bored, and then more and more, troublemakers start to appear as just something to do. Oh, how about 3 strikes, you're out, or whatever, Again, then you need to regulate the teachers more and make sure they don't abuse their power. But I think it should be like, oh, if you're just constantly trying to cause problems in the classroom, guess what? You're expelled, or go to a different class, see if it's the problem with your chemistry with the teacher. Oh, you're causing problems in that class too. Okay, well, you're expelled now. So maybe we'll try to find something for you, but there's got to be some accountability there. Otherwise, it just hurts everyone. And so, rightful authority. I think in the West we have a problem with, it's very ironic, a problem with authority, like culturally, legitimate authority. Authority has been so delegitimized in many ways, but even while it's like benevolent authority has become delegitimized, but then illegitimate, or we could say, malevolent or toxic authority has become legitimized. Like schools being able to control, oh, you have to take a vaccine or you can't come in school or something. Or you have to take this medical procedure or else you can't learn, Or the government saying, oh, yeah, you need to pay half your money in taxes because we love you. And, oh, yeah, and we're all, there's all these corruption scandals all the time, and no one's even surprised anymore. And it's, a cliche that politicians are oily, sleazy, untrustworthy. Everyone is just taken for granted. As in general, that's true. The people who want fame and attention and power and prestige, and they're not generally primarily concerned with helping. That's like the people who are at the very top anyway, who are able to get through the systems and the defense mechanisms within these systems. Everyone knows this, but it's just the way it is. All that money in the Cayman Islands and in Panama Papers and all that. Oh yeah, or they're all or the HSBC is caught laundering money for the drug cartels, and yet then they'll turn around and they'll have their anti-money laundering thing where you can't just access, you need 2-step verification, and it just makes things more of a pain in the butt trying to look at your money. There's all these weird centralizations of power in unsavory groups, and yet decentralized power in legitimate senses of a teacher over their classroom, parent over their children, or elders, say, over the community, seems like that's kind of gone out the window a little bit. And again, I don't know all the answers, but just thinking, and I think, something we need to think about, because it seems like things are sliding a bit in society. Have you noticed? Probably, right? So I think, talking about it is basically the first step. We need to become aware of what the problems are, then we can try to become aware of solutions. But step one is what are the problems, and maybe how do we do that? Well, I have my own ideas. I talk to myself and try to think it through. What's a problem? What's not? And you do the same, and everyone else does the same, and then we share notes, and we figure out almost everyone agrees this is a problem. It probably is then. Next step. What's the solution? So yeah, but I think there's been these losses of traditional knowledge. So I think there's an opportunity and a challenge, both, right? Two sides of the same coin, for people who are, getting older. Oh wait, that's me and you and everyone. To kind of try to be becoming more and more wise and competent, and just balanced and healthy. Live your best life, because it's not just your life, it's everyone's life. You know, we're all together in this. And so, you know, and the best way to do that is to treat it like a game, I think, to have fun, enjoy it, you know. So it's not like a drag, some serious thing. Oh, we have to save the world. How unfortunate. It sounds so heavy and serious. That's not going to save the world, I don't think. I think the way to save the world is use lightheartedness to be able to allow you to carry very heavy loads, and to enjoy life, you know, and let your conscience be clear, and let have a spring in your step, and just enjoy life as much as you can. And then there'll be times when you can't do that, and you just have to just try to accept suffering and tragedy and tyranny. But then most of the time, I think we can have joy, if not all the time. And that allows us more power to kind of help the world. But the point being, like, as you're a teenager, to try to prepare for adulthood, as an adult preparing for elderhood, an elder preparing for death and the transformation and transition into whatever's next. And of course, child preparing to be a teenager and all that, right? So, yeah, so I think that's more or less what I wanted to say, that there's great benefit in being an elder, and there's great benefit in connecting to elders, and we can learn so much from them, and just give them gratitude because they've been here, they've been around a long time, they've been working, they've been talking, they've been part of the world. And when we're elders, we will want to be shown the same courtesy and connection, and to be recognized as, yeah, we're still here. You know, we don't need to be shunted away into some old folks' home where no one has to look at us getting older and then dying, and we never want to see a dead body. Like, keep it all, put them in makeup. If we're going to look at them in a casket, they better be in makeup. You know, not being like afraid of looking at death or dying or sickness. Put them in hospitals. You know, and that, you know, no, we don't need to be shying away from this. Just understanding, yeah, like, this is part of life, and we can celebrate this and encourage this as a kind of a new opportunity. Your life isn't over after 60 or whatever. It's like, no, you're just beginning this new life, this new stage, you know, and there's an opportunity for rebirth there, rebirth every moment if you want, and that there is a great place, a crucial place for our elders. And this guy, Michael Meade, talks about, Meade, Michael Meade. I believe that's how you spell it. He's very, very interesting. He had a great podcast with Aubrey Marcus. Aubrey, Aubrey, Aubrey Marcus, who he has great podcasts in general. But this Michael Meade fellow was like talking about mythology and ancient Greek myths and all this kind of stuff, and just really interesting about all the stories of the past. And that's a great thing that elders used to pass on to the younger generations. And but he was talking about in that episode that we have a shortage of elders, and that more elders are needed, and that, you know, that this could play a huge role in kind of bringing us to a more peaceful place in history, getting out, you know, navigating the birth canal of all this madness that we're all going through currently, planetarily, and, you know, in our own lives as a reflection of that, because we can all feel like, oh yeah, do things feel like they could go on like this sustainably? No. Well, for most of history, it was like, things can go on like this sustainably forever. And then now let's focus on daily life. This is wonderful, and this will always be here. Life is always more or less, you know, like. And then, but every now and then are these cataclysmic kind of moments in time, whether it's by an asteroid or by, you know, a cultural crisis or technologically induced cultural crisis or whatever. And so elders have a place here, just as we all have a place, you know, all parts of the mosaic, all parts of the jigsaw puzzle. And so I think we can try to encourage that in others, to, you know, the most honorable version of elderhood, by honoring them, visiting our grandparents and spending time with them, and kind of letting them be aware, like, oh wow, I've got all this stuff that they don't know. I'm telling all these stories. They keep asking me. That's cool. And like, oh, they want to be with me. Okay, so I am important. Okay, and maybe I want to be with them too. And maybe then there'll be a bit of osmosis and exchange of ideas and perspectives. And maybe they've got some crazy thing. Oh yeah, I'm just not going to do that because of this. And Say, oh, that seems a bit selfish. Seems a bit hedonistic. What does hedonism mean? Oh, it's, like focusing on yourself too much and just pleasure rather than some greater principle of, being a good person or something. Oh, yeah, good point there, Grandma. Whatever. So I think, those who aren't elders, we can kind of try to celebrate them and connect with them. And then those who are elders or are becoming, we're all becoming them, I guess. Yeah, just to try to be that role and in general, just being surfing the wave of life graciously and gratefully and gracefully by enjoying youth, but also enjoying age. And that, it's not the young wines that have the most fun, And so there are many games to play, and as we're transitioning through time, the opportunity is to resurrect the wise elder archetype in ourselves and others, I guess. But so yeah, and so I guess this is a bit dedicated to my Nana who's passed and passed into another dimension. So I can talk to her. I don't know if she can hear me, but yeah. So I'm very grateful for all she's given me and all she has embraced from me, and just the fruits of sharing life with those of a previous generation, and just in general, just soul to soul, as fellow souls in this miracle of whatever the universe is. So that's it. Many thanks, agus gach bannacht. I'm a hish me not hish mahori, that'd be parent. Me shanwaher, grandma. So go hug your grandparents, or if they're not here, if they're in the next dimension, go hug your parents. Or if they're not here, if they're in the next dimension, hug yourself and up the elders. Power and glory to our wise, shimmering, silver-locked spiritual leaders. See you next week, everyone.